Welcome to Speaking of AI, where LXT's Phil Hall discusses current trends in AI with leading experts.
Hello and welcome. My guest today is Prem Natarajan, Chief Scientist and Head of Enterprise Data and AI at Capital One. Prior to joining Capital One, Prem spent 12 years at Raytheon BBN Technology and was VP of lxt.ai at Amazon. In parallel with this, he spent 10 years at University of Southern California. Now, what most people might know is that Prem is an inspiration and that he's an industry legend. But what those of you who haven't met Prem yet might not know is that he also has a deeply incisive sense of humour. With these things in mind, I'm excited, nervously excited, to welcome Prem to today's edition of Speaking of AI. Prem, hello and welcome.
Thanks, Phil. Excited to be here. Our association goes back a long way, and I couldn't be more delighted to be talking with someone about AI.
Fantastic. So, I'm going to lead off with a question about where things might be headed. So, what do you think might become the battleground capabilities for generative AI in the next year or two?
My answer might feel a little bit like general, but it actually, I can't imagine an area of human endeavor that is not going to become an area where somebody or the other is trying to apply and employ and harness the potential of generative AI transform. So, in fact, in my mind, from like coding to, code development to writing documents to communicating with others to finding information to organizing our lives, etc. I think generative AI is going to have, applied properly, thoughtfully, responsibly, it's going to have a beneficial impact on pretty much every aspect of our social and professional life. So I don't necessarily, this, Phil, I mean, coming from the background, I don't quite see it as much as a battleground as an opportunity to like deliver so much magic for so many people around the world that there's enough magic to be created for everybody to work on it.
Yeah, very diplomatic response. I think, a couple of observations I've made. One is that we did a survey of senior executives working in AI-related areas, and we asked about areas of application. And when we got the results, it was one area where we couldn't see any trend at all. And then my first reaction when I looked at the data was, oh, okay, there is no trend in this area. My reaction when I thought about it a little bit more was, oh, no. What this is telling me is that it's everywhere. It's not that there's the absence of a trend. The trend is that it's being applied everywhere. But my second comment on that, though, is with regard to the battleground status of this, and I suspect that Microsoft and Google might see that differently. It feels a bit like an arms race in that between those two organizations.
Let me get maybe a little bit. I don't know about specific organizations and how what their perspectives might be on it, but just to address the sense of where is I like to think about it in terms of individuals and humans, and where are we likely to be feeling most opportunity driven or like which leads to competition, right, in some sense. So there is an ecosystem developing around AI and around generative AI in particular, right? And so when we look at that ecosystem and we look at some of the fundamental building blocks of that ecosystem, obviously the large language models or foundation models are one place where there is going to be a lot of competition. And there are some open hypotheses that are still being explored. What is the balance of, there are some people who are betting on, one model will increasingly become better at everything, right? There are others who have the belief that custom tuned models for specific domains are the way to go. There are others who are somewhere in between on that spectrum of one thing that is everything and versus like lots of silo things, like some balance of customization, of fine tuning, supervised fine tuning, balanced with large language models trained on a broad variety of data, etc. So I think if we think about it as what are the battlegrounds for human endeavor, I think one of the hypotheses that going to be tested is what is the right balance of massive models that are capable of doing more and more and more and everything well versus specialization, right? So that's certainly one area of that's an intellectual battleground, if you will. Then there are the next level of battleground is what are some of the capabilities that are needed to unlock the application to different use cases. So if you're in healthcare, for example, uh, you may want the models to be more explainable or be more able to trace their reasoning in when they come to a conclusion, right? And so that's going to be another area of competition. Who has the models that give you the maximum performance consistent with what we see today, but are also able to explain their working, if you will, right? Uh, Yet another area of work would be in terms of reasoning, right? All of these are having interactions where they're responding to requests, or the human is playing a big role in directing the conversation in some way. But when you get into more complex tasks, how are they at reasoning, etc.? So that's yet another battleground. Then I'll elevate it and say there's also a bunch of supporting technologies that need to be built around these, because these things, as we know, can make up their mind that certain things exist that don't exist, right? And can do their best at trying to convince you that they exist. So things like vector databases, other knowledge bases in combination with these things. So there's a whole battleground for that. Then there is a lot of competition around which model building platform should we use. Is it one that one of the big providers of cloud services do, or is it some of the smaller people are saying these are also specialized endeavors? So there's just a number of these areas. I will just say, like you said in your survey, where you could either see battlegrounds or fertile fields of opportunity. And right now, when I stand kind of in some center of generative AI thing and I look all around, I'm seeing 360 degrees of fertile fields all around.
And with when you mentioned this continuum between the idea that one model will dominate everything, and at the other end that specialized models will be required for each vertical. Where do you stand on that continuum? What advice are you giving to folks?
My belief right now, so because I'm building stuff, or I'm in a place where I have to build stuff that can be used, and because we put a premium on the reliability and the robustness and a lot of other things, given the kind of enterprise we are, uh, things have to really work properly. We have to appropriately govern things, etc. So my view right now is kind of more conditioned by the state of affairs right now, and I think we're somewhere in the middle in the sense that we need the pre-trained models, but we can't actually employ them for use cases without customizing them on our data. And that customization, Phil, as you know, takes different forms. One is supervised fine tuning, where you might collect data that is representative of your use cases and do that. And that's what, I'm sure LXD is, think about one of the battlegrounds. One of the battlegrounds is where LXD is. Like, who is going to be the most proficient developer of instruction tuning data sets, and who can actually partner closely with people who know AI to be a data partner for them. I mean, this is your history. I mean, you've led the way there on the data side in the previous generation of AI development, our joint work on TransStack and some of the fun that we've had. But uh, but coming back to this, I think that that a balance of but the fine tuning takes multiple things. One is supervised fine tuning. The other is how do you construct prompts? And once you start about thinking constructing prompts, now you're saying how do I involve vector databases in anchoring on curated facts, on data that I know is on hard ground, that I have complete confidence in, etc. So to me, it feels like in the near term future, maybe near to midterm, we're very definitely living somewhere in the middle of that spectrum.
I'm going to shift gears slightly here. You're at Capital One. Capital One is very evidently a tech-forward organization, but it is, before being a tech-forward organization, it's a banking organization, it's a financial institution. So it's financial institution first, very tech-forward second. I'm not sure if I'm asking a question that's sort of out of limits here, but if you were advising your competitors on what they would, what anybody would need to do, or yeah, maybe let's put aside your competitors, but organizations that are less tech forward than Capital One, what do they need to be thinking about in order to not be left behind?
So I don't know necessarily that anybody needs to be left behind, Phil. But my view is each of us has to chart a strategy that reflects the current state of, like, we all have an approach to serving our customers. Like, in some sense, I like to think about it as all of us exist to serve our end customers in some way, right? And we've each adopted a particular approach. And at Capital One, we've certainly adopted an approach that is tech is tech based, right? To leverage technology to deliver the best value that we can to our end users, and do so responsibly and thoughtfully. And so the path for us is around the way I told you. I think we're somewhere in the middle, and customer data, etc. Now, each company has to decide, like, what is the customer service. So all of this in the end is simply a means to providing the value and the service to the customer that you want to provide. So in the abstract, it's kind of hard to say, like, because somebody might say they want to provide customer service in a particular way, and that's how they are differentiated, etc. So, but I think simply the fact that there is such a variety of services and service providers available, and ways to leverage this technology, that every enterprise, whether it's in finance or in law or in healthcare or in education, right? Everybody will find a way to leverage this technology to become better. In some sense, Phil, this was my view when we were in the DARPA world as well. The thing that we're competing with is the current version of ourselves. How can we leverage technology to become better every year, every week, every month, right? And so on that sense, I look at what's available today and say, literally everybody will be able to be on this continual improvement path, which means society at large and their end users and their customers will benefit. So I kind of think it's in a more exciting phase now than, like, just a relative advantage. Though I certainly think, like, we're, uh, we're kind of leading the way in thinking about how to leverage all of this technology, harness it responsibly, you know, think about the implications, but still use it properly. Apply the governance that we know how to, and use it to deliver the best value we can to our customers.
Great. So I read an interview, one of your recent interviews, and in the course of the interview, you said there is a deep imperative to operate all of this in a responsible, thoughtful way, which I think most people would agree with you. But when I think about a point like that, I wonder what is responsible, what is thoughtful, and in thinking about this question, are there some baseline truths, or are those truths rationalized by competing perspectives and interests. For example, if you're thinking about operating responsibly, is there a prioritization of being responsible to customers, to employees, to shareholders, to society as a whole? And is there a conflict in thinking about that sense of responsibility and thoughtfulness?
Yeah, I think one of the great aspects of modern technology and its advances has been that it has allowed us to not have to make those kinds. We're able to make advances on all of these because these are fundamentally things that make us all more capable at doing something, more capable of finding the stuff that we want, more capable of delivering value to people that we want to deliver value to. So in that sense, I see all of this in the end. In my mind, I see Phil. This. I've long seen technology as one of the kind of properly done democratizing influence, right? If, for example, back when we were working on speech to speech translation, the thing that excited me about that was the fact that even if you and I didn't share, you and I both speak English, so I'm able to have this conversation with you. But even if you and I don't share a common language, as humans, we want to share a conversation, right? And so the fact that speech to speech, real time spoken language translation could allow us to have that conversation even when you don't share a language was super exciting to me, right? In that same way, I think all of this technology, all of this AI, so when I say responsibly and thoughtfully, I'm kind of connecting to a few different motivations that at least are within me. One is I want to make sure that this technology is making things better for everyone, right? That it's not in some way a trade-off in the sense things are better for someone versus worse for someone. In fact, that's one of the things I find most inspiring about advances in technology, not just AI, is that it allows us to lift things for everyone, right? So that's the first part. Second is as these things become more and more effective or more capable, uh, I think we want to bring in more perspectives right from the design stage. So I think I strongly believe in the notion of inclusion at the design stage. How do we bring in many different perspectives? So ultimately, this thing is meant to serve humans, and so the more diverse perspectives I can bring in terms of its use and how something might be used, et cetera, help inform us to build a better and more robust product for everyone, right? A third thing is there are lots of things we care about when we're in such a business as we are, customer trust and safety and all of that. And so thinking about those things as we're designing it, not just as an optimization after the fact, but right from the design stage. How do we bring all of those perspectives in? To me, that's the essence of responsible and thoughtful approach. Be inclusive, make sure diverse perspectives are saying, make sure you're constantly testing all of your hypotheses, that you're generating hypotheses to test in your testing, and then that you're also testing them in the real world before you actually launch them into a product.
It's very reassuring to have someone like you in this role. I'm really pleased to see that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned our DARPA connection a couple of times during the course of the conversation here, and
Well, that's how we met.
for
How can I?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was an exciting time. It
Yes.
was. I would come to those DARPA group meetings where, for those who in the background here who don't know, we worked on DARPA projects where multiple technology leaders would be competing with one another to make advances, and the competitive environment actually produced very rapid advancement in the technology. And it was exciting. It felt like we were doing something that was going to change the world. Or, well, let me back that off slightly. It felt like we were doing something that might change the world if we could get it right. But it also, to me, felt far from certain that we were ever going to get there. Now, I've got a quote here. at the end of 5 years of hard work on the TransTAC program, the director of the program, Mary Mader, described the accuracy that we achieved as enough to be interesting, but not enough to be useful. And at that time, I have to say, I had doubts as to whether this would ever be possible. It was a struggle to make the technology work in even the cleanest and most controlled of environments. And the reality is that we were designing technology to work in the dirtiest and most difficult of circumstances, with all the issues that come with that. How strong was your confidence that we would ultimately achieve the breakthroughs that we've seen, particularly since, let's say, 2012, 2013? There's been massive breakthrough after massive breakthrough, and now the recognition, translation, and synthesis pieces that went into TransTAC are all at a level of advancement that I found difficult to imagine back then.
Indeed. So I'll say this. I was super hopeful. I mean, partly when you're in the business that I'm in, which is building technology that is going to be useful a few years from now, right? Deep inside you lives a technology optimist, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
you
absolutely.
may, it, so in some sense, um, it's also a mindset in my mind, right? That you think this problem is so worth solving. So at least the way I've approached a lot of these things, Phil, is think about the feasibility later, but first ask yourself, is this problem worth solving? Is this something that is a hard problem, but one that will make so much value to the world or deliver so much value to the world when it is solved, right? Once you pass that filter, then the next thing you have to ask is, are the elements of this problem interesting to me? And to me, anything that involved human language and machines learning them, et cetera, at that time, and still does, remained very interesting. And just fundamentally, they appeal to me. It's one of those things you don't know why, but they appeal to you, right? And so I'd say my mindset at that time was, boy, this is such an important capability or set of technologies to develop. And boy, this was so hard. And to me, all that meant was, oh my God, I'm going to have fun for so many years solving this problem, right? Which is that, so it was less a question of, oh, this is overwhelmingly hard, and more like, oh my God, this is going to be so awesome to work on. Because, and deep inside that, the basis is, if you thought you would never succeed, then it would be hard to keep that optimism channeled, right? So I think deep inside, I always believe this is coming. Could we have predicted the specific arc of things? Probably not, right? What probably we didn't predict the specific arc of things, but but when you look back at where we were, even during the speech-to-speech translation times, you look back, you can see that there were several inflection points in the technology, even during the course of the program, right? Even during that 5 years, where she said it went from being interesting, I don't remember the exact quote, but not entirely useful, something like that. I would say even the users of it were finding it useful in very specific instances, right? It was just not like useful in every situation. That's a big change. Like at the start, you had no technology and people were simply stringing together different components to deliver a capability. By the end, we had an integrated thing that was talking to each other, et cetera, and being able to deliver things, which some people found useful in some cases. That was so my way of thinking about it was like, oh my God, look at this. At the start of this thing, we thought we could never get there in 5 years. Halfway through it, we said, oh, maybe we can get there in 5 years. At the end of 5 years, we look back and we say, oh my God, I can't imagine what a distance we've traveled in 5 years. And if that's how I feel about the first 5 years, do I want to continue on that journey for the next 5 years? Heck yeah. It's
Yeah.
an awesome
Yeah.
ride.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. I have to say that was some of the most enjoyable time in my life. I felt like I was on such a voyage of discovery, and I loved attending the events associated with it. It was something else. Um, just a couple of wrap up questions here. One is, what do you see as the biggest risk to successful AI deployment?
I think there are a few performance curves that we have to bend, right? I mean, we have to make this more affordable across the spectrum. I mean, we have to bend the cost of being able to deliver good, useful AI across a broad spectrum of use cases, right? I think that's the first in my mind. Um, the second, I think, is I'll go back to my responsible, thoughtful thing. I really think, across the board, we need to make sure that we're focused on understanding the behavior of the things we're building and the potential outcomes, and bring in a diversity of perspectives. If that means that we move a little bit slower than we could otherwise, in my mind, that's okay, because at this point I see the potential for so much impact and for so much beneficial impact if it is done right, that I think one of the risks could be that that there is a race to kind of be the first on something, and that's not ideal or something. But beyond that, I think there are a bunch of other factors to consider. How who owns the data, how does how do we build these models? Can we There are some business models to be worked out in different things, but in the kind of society we live in, where we've managed to find solutions, I'm pretty sure those I'm optimistic about. Like, we'll find a fair arrangement that works for everyone, but there are some of those things that need to be worked out. But overall, Phil, I'll go back to being my optimist self. I
Yeah,
I think we're going to figure it out. You know.
yeah. I was actually on a call about 12 hours ago, late last night, discussing a fairly difficult problem that we're facing. And our head of technology said to me, he said, "Look, I'm pretty confident about this. I'm 90% confident that I'm right." And I said, "My optimism is at the same level as your confidence. My confidence is not, but my optimism is at the same level as your confidence."
Oh, you see, but this is why we all love language, no? I mean, look at that
Absolutely, yeah.
wonderful semantic nuance that you teased out, and it's such a joy to hear it, right?
So, Prem, my final question for you. If you were running this interview, what is the question that you would really be hoping I would ask, and what's the answer?
If I was running this, and I know this is at the back of your mind, how is my family doing? How's my wife? How are my three girls? And they're doing wonderfully. They're the joy of my life, and part of what also drives me is to keep using AI to make this a better, more joyful place for all of them to be in. So I'll say that was the question that I know is at the back of your mind, and I asked it for you, and I answered it for you. So,
Prem, it is always a delight to spend time with you. I'm pleased we could do this today. I'm sad that we're not in the same room or perhaps over a dining table, but
same.
I know we will be again soon. I can't thank you enough for your time today. I think people are going to find this tremendously insightful and interesting. And yeah, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Prem.
Thank you, Phil. It's the feeling is entirely mutual. Uh, and I'll also say, I've seen you go through so many uh, incarnations. Musician, you know, uh, data maven, uh, you know, growth officer, and now podcast host. So it's just amazing. So, I have to figure out how to follow that kind of trajectory, you know.
Thanks again, Prem. I really look forward to the next time we speak.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Joy.